Hello and welcome to another Laboratory Maniacs podcast. I know it's been a while, but with me is Cameron.
Hello again.
I am Sigi, and we're doing podcasts today.
Yeah.
How long has it been?
Oh, it was the start of the season, so this was back in April, May, maybe June. It's been a long time.
Yeah. But we are back. And with us returning, there's also going to be a couple of changes to our podcast format. We are not going to do podcasts only between seasons anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we are doing our podcast once for every relevant set release. So not for Modern Masters, Iconic Masters, that kind of stuff, but for standard legal sets or for commander sets or stuff like Conspiracy, if there's anything relevant there.
Yeah, when new cards get pushed into the environment, we'll want to take some time to just go over their impact, see how it is in retrospective a month or two out, and just take a kind of state of competitive EDH when we can.
Yeah, since things have been changing quite a lot recently in competitive EDH, we're going to take a look at all of that. So yeah, we are going to be here for a while.
There's a lot to go over.
Yeah, and on top of just changes relating to cEDH, we are also going to be talking about stuff that's relevant to our channel, like what do we have planned, what do we have coming out, and so on and so forth. And at the end, we're going to have a short segment with questions from our viewers, or listeners in this case.
Yes, and if your question doesn't get answered now, we do have an email address, laboratorymaniacs@gmail.com, as well as Discord and Reddit and all those other great places, and Facebook, where you can shoot questions to us, and we'll hit them up next time if we can't answer you immediately.
All those other great places and Facebook. Yeah. Okay, let's get right into it. First off, some Laboratory Maniacs stuff. A bit of a celebration is in order, because we recently broke 7,000 subscribers.
Thank you, everybody. Jeez, it has been a little under a year. And I mean, I know in our first end of season one, our pie in the sky goal was 500 subs, and we more than quadrupled that. And now we're at 7K. We
absolutely smashed it.
And thank you for all of the support and involvement. It's been a privilege to be able to create this content and have so many people enjoy it and appreciate the time that we put into it. So thank you again.
Yes, thanks from me as well. I've really been enjoying this journey of and with the Laboratory Maniacs so far. It's been great. I was honestly surprised to see that there is this much of an interest in competitive EDH, and seeing all of these people be interested in the format really makes it worth it.
At the same time, I do also want to shout out to our Patreon supporters. We've already started using some of the funds to provide additional pieces of content, and we're very grateful and humbled by the amount of support that you guys as a community have given to us. So thanks again there as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. The Patreon has honestly been great. I'm glad that people are happy and willing to support us like that, and we are going to try to use the help to make things even better as we go along. Speaking of things we've been improving, the hand tracker feature for Season 2 has been kind of like the big new thing we've been doing. And from what I've seen, it's been quite well received.
Yeah, it has been well received. It has been a lot of work. I know in episode 2, we had some...
Oh, God.
It was one of our longest episodes, and it didn't have perfect documentation. And it was kind of the genesis of us having to massively document out our games to the point that if you think, I mean, we just did our stream and we were able to get a game in about 45 minutes. And that was playing fast. And if all of us are playing fast when we're recording a game, we're still looking at about 2.5 hours of time that we're having to put into it to make sure that whenever we brainstorm, we write down the 3 cards we draw and the 2 cards we put back. From that, I know that first one, my wife Tasha was helping me out and ended up having to do a logic problem to figure out where all these cards went. And while I was editing one day, she spent 13 hours going through the video and having to figure out where cards came and went. And it was, man, that video would not have gone up with Hand Tracker had she not done that. But I'm very glad with how we've been able to get it done. And the amount of tension that provides for videos is crazy. In our Commander 17 one, I had Isochron, Scepter with Final Fortune and Sundial going. And the entire time I was doing this, Luke had a Stifle in his hand. And I went through like 3 turns. And it was just so painful.
It's really funny because while you'd think that it would kind of be a spoiler in a way, the excitement actually gets amplified by knowing what other people have and like watching them, how they're going to run into, say, that Stifle or a double counter spell or something like that.
Or like Dan's hand where you had the game win in your opening hand and Dan's just like, yeah, I'm going to turn 1 Windfall. It's going to be great.
Or like every single one of Dan's hands against me where I play some kind of deck that cares about the graveyard.
Dan and Fairy Macabre has destroyed you so many times. Though, luckily he did get destroyed by it in our last video. So
that felt so good.
I knew it would.
You can't even imagine. When I saw that, I was really satisfied.
Oh yeah, because you weren't actually in that game. So you didn't.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had to sit out. But seeing Dan get absolutely demolished by that Fairy Macabre made everything worth it.
I know how that can feel.
Okay. Let's move on to other things that we've introduced in this season, namely 2 new types of content.
Yeah.
The live brew and now the strategy spotlight.
Yeah, the live brew has been amazing. It's been really fun to sit and go through all of the thought processes involved in creating a deck.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Like, the one thing I've honestly felt was a bit lacking from our content was that while we did cover like the newer and medium level or medium advanced level cEDH players, we didn't really have something that was useful even for the most enfranchised players. And that's something I've personally not quite enjoyed.
True. And at the same time, it also let us bring in new players, which was probably the best part about it for me, was that we could start talking about the reasons behind some of the cards that we are playing and the benchmark that we're trying to set. And it really opened up a lot of eyes towards the format.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. The great thing about the live brews is that you can start talking about something and explain the basic reasoning and stuff that seems sort of basic to someone who spends a lot of time brewing, and then you can move on from there and go like deeper and deeper and deeper, however deep you want to go. And being able to accommodate both of these types of information in one video has honestly been quite fantastic in my opinion.
Totally.
On that note though, since we're talking about the live brews right now, I would like to give a big shout out to the professor at Tulare Community College that we've done the Inala video with together for Commander 2017.
That was an amazing privilege.
Yes.
The professor is a awesome class act of a guy. He found us really early. I think he found us when we were still only like 2 or 3 months into creating the Lab Maniacs. And he gave us a shout out on Twitter, and we made a connection, and we were finally able to do a collaboration. And I'm very excited to see if we can do more of this. The deck that we created was totally done on the fly. We had, oh man, I think we ended up spending like 3.5, 4 days feverishly working on getting both the deck created and helping him write the deck tech that he did. We ended up writing the entire script for the deck tech, and we're able to get a lot of key strategy points talked about, like only running all of the fetch lands, because it really does help. Yes, it is like 2 or 3%, but free percentages for a win are free percentages.
Yeah, totally. That was a great thing. I was so happy when we finally got that video uploaded, because it was sort of amazing to see someone you've been like looking up to and respecting for a long time do something with you that you've taken part in, so to say.
Yes, it's still surreal listening to the deck tech, and he says the lines that I wrote out, and it's like, thank you. Oh my gosh. It has been surprising how well it was received, and we really appreciated that.
Like, we had initially expected a bunch of backlash, since competitive EDH is not something a lot of people were particularly familiar with, but it's actually been quite the opposite. Like, we've gained so many new viewers, and we've made so many new people interested in competitive EDH. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean, even we've seen some shout outs from Rachel Agnes on VSL talking about competitive EDH in Channel Fireball. We saw our subscriber count go up by 50% overnight. And it's really exciting to see how the community has been growing still. I mean, we've even heard that Wizard of the Coast has seen competitive EDH, and they're taking it into account. So it's a really exciting time to be in competitive EDH as we see the community expand.
I totally agree. One other thing that I've been quite happy to see is that people from within our community that have been members for a good while have also started stepping forward and creating their own content thanks to what we've been putting out. For example, one person I'd like to shout out here is Fossil from the cEDH Discord.
Yes.
Who's honestly been making some fantastic content.
Yeah, he did a podcast, and was he interviewing Razblocks?
Moxnix, actually.
Moxnix, yes. Moxnix. And it was a really interesting look back into early competitive EDH and some of the starts for it. And I know he's done 2 or 3 of those. There's been a few articles that have been done. I believe Infinite IMOC made one. I think he might be doing more. I'm not sure. But seeing the content be generated by the community has been very satisfying to see other people joining in and contributing to the format.
Yeah. It's really great. And we've also got a great thing coming.
Well, we have another great piece of content that we haven't quite talked about yet.
Oh, yeah, we've been going on about the live brew the whole time, but the strategy spotlight still exists, of course.
Yeah, by the time this gets out, we probably have released the strategy spotlight. So the first one has gone out about Protean Hulk, going over what it is and why it's so good in competitive EDH. And that's another piece of theory and history that we're really excited to see how it gets received, and other ones that we can bring out. I know we actually have a list of about 10 different things to look at going forward, from individual build around me creatures to just strategies, and we've got some good content to bring, and we're excited about that.
Yeah, I hope you're all going to be as excited about it as we are, because quite frankly, it looks great. I've already watched the Strategy Spotlight Hulk episode, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. Alright, now, however, the thing I wanted to talk about. This season of Laboratory Maniacs is going to be a tiny bit shorter than the first one. We're going to end it at 8 episodes, if I understand correctly. And our final episode is going to be another special one. Oh boy.
Yes. It's so our previous one, we ended up having to record twice. So we kind of had a practice game in there. We recorded it once, and the game was so long that one of the participants, the recording, had an issue with it, and we weren't able to salvage it. But this one coming up, it's been crazy as far as all the work that we're having to figure out what we're doing with it. I don't know, should we spoil what the actual twist is?
I wonder. Yeah, sure, why not? I mean,
so
what we're going to be doing...
Go for it, Sigi.
I will. Thrasios and friends, the partner commanders, have had quite an impact on competitive EDH since they've come out about a year ago. Now, what we're doing for our final video is we're going to look at what things would be like if every legal commander had a partner.
Yes, and that is a really big challenge. Primarily because we're wanting to show what can happen if we start pairing commanders that don't normally see play. And we're not just looking at taking an existing strategy and throwing it together, which some of the decks have that, but we're really trying to highlight commanders that haven't seen much play due to possible color restrictions. It's to the point where I think I've brewed like 9 decks, and I'm not really happy with them yet. And I think we're probably going to have like 2 or 3 practice games just to go through and see what it's like, because this is going to be fun. And it's something that if I really do enjoy it as much, I may actually get some people to play with me in real life.
Sure, I mean, it looks like a fun thing. If the decks actually end up somewhat balanced, I could totally see myself playing this kind of format every once in a while. And the kind of decks we're trying to build are not stuff like, let's say, 5-color Zer or Thrasios and X doesn't really work because they're already partners.
Well, I mean, that is one of the challenges.
5-color Prosh, for instance. That's also not something we're looking to do. However, for instance, one potentially interesting idea I had was, God, what was it? Like Sequoia with something with white to do Fruity Pebbles, like Enduring Renewal.
Was it like Sequoia or Tigam?
Yeah, that could work, for instance.
I know.
Yeah.
I was looking at, what was it? Zer Ishkana at one point. So you can use Ishkana as sort of like, you can use Zer for food chain. You can go food chain off. You can get Ishkana. There's, oh man, should I even open up my list of decks that I've brewed?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. Give me a second to actually pull this up, because this is...
I'm not going to reveal the one I'm probably going to go for.
Yeah.
because that will be left for the video.
I'm not even sure which ones I have yet. And of course, Tapped Out is...
While you're looking up your decks, I'm going to mention one that I've also been thinking about, which is Sliver Queen plus... What was it?
Was that the Perforos?
Oh, yeah, Sliver Queen plus Perforos, because that way you get 2 combo pieces in your command zone, and if you have an Ashnod's Altar, you win.
You still have to, like, pay to get Sliver Queen in play.
I mean, yeah, it's stupidly expensive mana-wise, but just having 2 pieces in the command zone is kind of spicy.
Very much so. The kind of downside with this brewing is that Thrasios is so good as a commander. Okay, here we go. So I have Grenzo Mimeoplasm.
Yeah.
With the goal of mashing up Grenzo Doomsday with Flash Hulk. So you've got the existing Grenzo Doomsday shells, which are really fast. They're blisteringly fast. And then you add in both blue and green with Mimeoplasm, and you get Flash, you get Hulk, and then you have both the Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Walking Ballista Winds. You have part of your Grenzo lines are things with Kiki Jiki, and you can go off with Kiki Jikis very easily. So it also makes some of the Grenzo lines easier because you don't have to use Zealous Conscripts. You can use Pestromite, or you can use... so you don't have to pump up Grenzo. You can just keep Grenzo at 2 power, and you're good to go. I looked at Edric Tassiger Apostle Cannon.
What?
So Thrasios and Tymna Apostle Cannon, but using Edric and Tassiger. So you get Edric in your command zone. You've got a million Shadowborn Apostles. You swing, you draw a ton of cards. I've looked at Chainveil Zur. So Chainveil Teferi, adding Zur into the mix for some Necropotence. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
The one that I was really excited for, but I really couldn't get to look great, is Anala Derevi Wizard Ball.
That one just sounds silly.
Well, so it's it's Cobblepot's Wizard Ball, which is really, really out there. It is a deck from left field. You lose to it because you don't know what's going on. The interactions they're not what you expect to see, but they're very efficient. And then you add in Inala to just get free extra wizard. I mean, essentially free extra wizards. You're paying 1 mana. But if you have like an Earthcraft out, it's essentially free. And you get some fun stuff with that. So those are some example ideas of decks that I've been throwing out. Do you have any, Sigi?
Other than the 2 I've mentioned, not really. I'd have to think some more, but if my first idea doesn't end up working out, I might just go for the Sequoia play, because that seems kind of spicy.
It does sound like a fun deck just to hang around with.
Yeah. Okay, I think that wraps it up for our first big segment, Lab Maniac stuff. We've spent a solid 20 plus minutes just talking about that, and we have lots more to go.
True.
The next big segment we're going to do is what has happened in competitive EDH in the last several months.
Oh man, so much.
Mm-hmm. So we're basically going to choose our starting point from the release of Hour of Devastation. And there's been a lot of stuff going on. Like, we're going back to July, I think.
So this wasn't pre-Hulk, was it?
It was not pre-Hulk.
Okay.
Hulk was unbanned on the 24th of April.
Okay. So since then, we made our Inala Brew.
Yeah.
We did that. The Grixis commanders from Commander 17 were interesting. They're very build around me, both Inala and Kess just shouted out, build me, build me, build me, I'm going to be awesome. And
yeah,
I've been happy with where Inala ended, but I think that there is still more to do with her. There are several different ways you can build her. And I think that going where we had it right now, I don't think it is ready with the current metagame of decks that are out there, and it needs some extra help. But as a starting deck, it is a really solid start. From the 500 build up, I was really happy with the way it came together, how we were able to fit everything in.
Yeah, I think one thing I would do would be to go back and look at maybe making an unbudgeted version completely from the ground up, while paying closer attention to the potential strategic changes a list like that might undergo when budget is not a concern at all.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. We really went all in on the singular win condition, and we didn't expand it out as much as we went up in the budget. So we really just went for value improvements and replacements for the cards that we had. And I can see that. And I think that has... I see both sides of that. Going from the top down can give you maybe a little bit of a different picture.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can do that sometime.
Yeah, sure. So, the one thing with Inala that I think is still going to be her predominant strength is that she has the 1-card combo with Wonderwine Prophets and the 2-card combo with Bloodline Necromancer and Ashnod's Altar.
Yeah.
What that means is that the deck doesn't have to waste a great amount of card slots on combos, since you've got basically 3 slots and then maybe 1 or 2 extra for redundancy purposes or whatever, and the rest of your deck can be dedicated to interaction, card draw, engines, and so on and so forth. So I think that I'd probably change the deck into a mid-range control-ish thing, even as an unbudgeted one.
Yeah, I actually took some time to theory craft out an Inala stacks deck with adding in Mistbind Click into the Ashnod's Altar plan. So Mistbind Click, when it comes into play, you tap all lands target player controls. So if you do the champion dance and you do it on their upkeep after they've untapped, you can keep all of your opponent's lands tapped down. And if you have something like Null Rod out, you can really hamper their mana. And so it was something where I've put some thought into the stacks end of that, and I'm actually excited with where that can go to.
Definitely interesting. I do think there's one issue that's going to be inherent to Inala being slightly color restricted, as unfortunate as that may sound, which I recall is actually something you wanted to talk about.
Yes.
How important is green right now?
Oh man, green with both stacks and fast combo are super important right now. You have Protean Hulk, and you have a million Mana Dorks, and you have things like Root Maze. So if you're wanting to really slow down the environment, green has some really powerful, really cheap hate pieces they can play. They also have mana accelerants, and they have one of the most broken legal combo engines in the format right now. So it's really hard for both Inala and Kess to really shine, even though they are very powerful individual commanders. And they're 3 colors. They're Grixis. They're one of the strongest color combinations in other formats. But because of how easy it is to go 4 colors right now, not having green is really challenging for them. And it puts them on the back foot from the start.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Green just has been incredibly good. On top of the things you mentioned, green also just provides you with random other utility stuff. You get Carpet of Flowers, which is arguably one of the best ramp spells in the entire format.
Oh god, yeah.
You get... And these two are actually really important, in my opinion. You get Noxious Revival and Regrowth.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why those are so important is the ability to do Twister Loops.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, while I don't particularly like Twister Loops as a soul or main win con, are just something you can have in your deck without really needing to commit to it, because all the cards are already good enough to play on their own.
Yeah. And also you get things like Memory's Journey, which you don't really expect. But getting the additional free recovery spell just by having green is really, really powerful. And not having it makes both Anala and Kess a little sad.
Oh man, if they had green, they would be incredible. Let's continue talking about Kess for a bit, though, because she is quite interesting, in my opinion. There's been a bit of a, let's say, Kess mania going on since she had been spoiled. People have brewed a lot of different decks, but what's your take on Kess?
People from the start said that Kess replaces Jeleva, and in some environments, she can. The funny part is that in the classic Jeleva Storm, she doesn't. Because you really want to use Jeleva as a dig tool. You never really want to cast Jeleva. I mean, you want to win without having to cast Jeleva. But when you do cast her, you want to see 16 cards and hope that one of those 16 cards is going to win you the game.
Yep.
And if there's something like a Rest in Peace or a Leyline, which, surprise, surprise, Protean Hulk's around, those are really popular right now.
Oh, yeah.
Kess does nothing for that. But as a standalone commander, she is incredibly fun to play. And she's so complex. Having to think about, well, if I cast this from my graveyard and I get that spell, when can I do this? And you have to be planning your turns so far in advance. In some ways, it feels like it's almost doomsday on a commander with how much you have to plan out what you're doing with Kess. And I enjoy it, but I see the challenge of facing off against Jeleva and the usefulness for Jeleva.
Yeah, my take on Kess is kind of similar. So, as you said, for a Storm and Doomsday deck, Jeleva is probably just going to be better. An additional reason that I'd mention there is that Jeleva has the upside of having a wider range of keepable hands, because Kess on her own doesn't really provide you with any form of gas. Jeleva, on the other hand, does so with a very high probability, especially when there's another Storm-type deck in your pod.
Yeah.
This, in turn, means that keeping hands that are very heavy on fast mana, but without some form of payoff, is often a fine thing to do in a Jeleva deck, and that's absolutely not the case for Kess.
Oh yeah, with Kess you want both fast mana and then a tutor, and then you get Kess out, you use your fast mana to cast the tutor twice, and then you have both your payout and possibly more gas you can use. But not having that makes your hand really, really difficult to keep, and you have to start either playing the control game from the very start or hoping you can top deck those, or mulliganing down to 4 cards to actually get something useful.
Yeah, and similarly to this, I think Kess is actually kind of awkward in a lot of different strategies. While she is the most generically useful Grixis commander that we have, for every strategy that people have built with her, there's always a bit of awkwardness. Let's go down the list. So, Kess Control. One thing that kind of sucks about Kess Control is that you can only use her ability on your turn. So, a reactive control deck kind of suffers from that. On top of her just being 4 mana in Grixis colors, which can kind of screw you if you decide to go for casting Kess at the wrong point in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Kess turns. She has great synergy with turns, but the turn strategy as a whole feels inherently weaker than a lot of the other ones, because similarly to Storm, you can still fizzle. You can't run ad nauseam, which gives Storm its higher consistency, since you're running a bunch of expensive turn spells, and it just takes more to get going, which can be problematic for a deck that at its core is combo.
I agree with you that it can be problematic, but I do think that she is the only commander that can really pull off turns well in competitive EDH besides Edric. The difference being that she provides you a control route rather than the aggro tempo route that Edric does. And Kess has a very different grindy-ish play style that will appeal to a different crowd than Edric will.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, all of the builds I'm talking about are viable and playable and mostly fine, but they all just have this kind of awkward bit to them.
Yes.
What's left after turn? Reanimator or Twin?
Kind of both, because most of the times you reanimate into a twin.
Yeah. So this, I think, actually is the thing that Kess really excels at.
I agree, yeah.
Because in this particular strategy, she can utilize all the tools. Like, she is amazing at using Entomb, Gamble as well.
Yep.
Okay, one of my absolute favorite plays in Kess Storm that can also be used in a Kess Reanimator deck, if that's what you want to do, is crack LED, discard York, use Kess's ability to cast York from the grave with the mana you made from your LED.
Nice. Screw LED's downside. We'll use our commander anyways.
Yeah. And she really does it well. Entomb, Buried Alive, all of this kind of stuff, Kess can do it.
Yeah, it's just the downside with the Reanimator Twin route is, guess what, guys? Graveyard hate is really big right now.
Yep.
So she faces a lot of, it's the affinity effect on Modern, where just because everybody's running it, everybody else that runs artifact-based things gets extra hate on it. So your Protean Hulk decks are making Kess worse just by being there.
You are completely correct about that. That's a good analogy, actually. Let's take a bit of a broader look at the rest of the cEDH environment now. There's a bunch of new decks that have come out independently from Commander 2017.
Mm-hmm.
To start, I'd probably want to talk about Razaketh from Hour of Devastation.
Big Papa Demon. He is so good. Oh man, there's the mono black Sidisi routes. Who was it that wrote up the giant primer on how to use Razaketh?
So Seuss made the mono black Sidisi version, and then Shaper made a Thrasios and Tymna version, exploring a bunch of different possible lines.
And those are just amazing, how just having Razaketh out, and you're playing Thrasios Tymna, you've got dorks anyways. Just go for it. You're going to have creatures to sack, and you can get into loops with so many different creatures to get infinite tutors. It's so good.
It's actually kind of incredible, like, how little Razaketh needs to come online. For instance, there's this big thing in the multicolor Razaketh decks that's called the Lifeline, where you basically only need one creature, a bit of life, and a tiny bit of mana, And what you do is you get Razaketh on the battlefield, you sack your creature, you go grab life and death. You cast the life part, that's the interesting thing, to animate all of your lands. Then you go find Gaia's Cradle, get some extra mana there, and then you've got a bunch of mana and a bunch of tutors that you can use to go into your win lines.
So you start with almost nothing and end with 15 tutors to get whatever you need and a lot of mana to get there. Yeah. I mean, even just the mono black routes where you're sacking an Ornithopter to get a Shield Sphere, to get a just chain a bunch of creatures to then run into a reassembling skeleton and Song of the Damned to get a ton of mana to then fuel an Aetherflux Reservoir win off of just sacking creatures, and you're paying 2 life the entire time, but you're able to get through Aetherflux just by having cast like 15 spells in a turn.
It's amazing.
They're very glass cannony when they're mono black, but when they go off like that.
Oh yeah. Interestingly enough, Razaketh has not only found his place in the more combo-oriented decks, like Sidisi, like the Razaketh deck, but also in more mid-rangey or stacks-heavy decks, like the former Hulk Weaver, which used to be Boon Weaver, which is now, people haven't quite agreed on a name yet, but basically a Thrasios and Tymna Hate Bears deck that runs Razaketh to get to its winning lines.
So you've got Demon Weaver and you've got Razakats. I think there's 1 or 2 more, but those are the 2 leading ones. And it's kind of funny that there's Boon Weaver's not in the deck anymore, but they still got Weaver in there. But it's the same thing. It's 98% is what it feels like, the same cards, but doing it faster and more efficiently.
And that's what we're all about. Okay, so that's Razaketh. He's great. I like him quite a lot. I've been playing the Razaketh deck myself, and have actually had really good results on it.
I threw him in Apostle Cannon, and he's the only reason Apostle Cannon actually works. He's the only demon.
Yeah, he's fantastic there.
Yeah, when you can summon him out of your deck. Special summon for those Yu-Gi-Oh guys. But throw him onto the battlefield and then have a few more apostles sitting around to sack to him and just win on the spot. It's great. But what else have we had pop up?
Quite a lot, in fact. So apart from these 2 like big haymakers from C17 and Hour of Devastation, we've had a couple of new lists that just either could have existed earlier or also like came out as new. One of those, for example, would be a list that we actually played on our channel, which is Taigam, Ojutai Master.
Yeah, he is surprisingly strong for white-blue. The fact that when he's in play, your instants and sorceries can't be countered. Well, your dragons too, but nobody plays dragons. Your instants and sorceries can't be countered is really difficult to play around.
I hate that so much.
And you're like, I've figured it all out. I've got a counterspell backup, and then Taigon counters your spell, and you're like,
that's... In our Commander 2017 special, when I went for that Yorgwill, I had triple counter backup. Yeah. I was so sure I was going to win.
Yeah, and then...
it was so sad.
Negate. Taigon out. No. Yeah. It's... He is surprisingly strong. Mm-hmm. We've also seen Momur Vig pop back up again.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people were saying the Menagerie Warden was going to bring Momur back, but actually, it's something different.
Yeah, people just tossed in a bunch of so-called hacks into Momur Vig, which are these like small, usually blue cards that replace one instance of a color word on a card with another color word.
Mm-hmm. And so you change what Momur has 2 triggers. When you play a blue creature, you draw a card. When you play a green creature, you tutor for a creature and put it on top of your deck. And so
Yeah.
you change the blue to green, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And then you basically just ball completely out of control.
So whenever you play a green creature, you both tutor and draw a card. And you can elf ball from there.
I think that's the gist of it, yeah. I haven't seen the deck in action yet, but I've been hearing that it's been putting up quite consistent results, both in gold fishing and in actual games. So I'm definitely excited to get a glimpse of it.
Yeah. And other decks, there are a few ones. I think you were brewing He-Man. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Luke's little brothers and my take on Thrasios and Timna.
Do you want to explain what He-Man?
Yes. So the acronym He-Man stands for Humility, Effective, Mid-Range Ad Nauseam. There we go.
So
this deck is special.
It is stacks with ad nause and...
No.
Oh, no?
This one is not stacks. That's the big difference. Like, we wanted to make a stacks list, but then we just made this. It's, in my opinion at least, the closest thing to an actual mid-range deck that we've got right now. It runs a lot of interaction. It also has really good win conditions, and it does have like a bit of a stacksy thing in terms of running hate, but no actual like mana denial effects or stuff like that.
So more like rest in peace type and humility rather than your winter orbs and null rods.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's a deck that's quite tuned to the current meta. So we're fighting graveyard stuff with it. We're fighting creature abilities, or creatures in general, because Timna has been huge, Thrasios is huge, and there's hardly any win conditions in most decks right now that can win through a humility.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Doomsday doesn't work, Food Chain doesn't work, Bomberman doesn't work, you can't do Twister Loops.
You can't do Tasigur, you can't do Thrasios.
Yeah.
You can't do Hulk.
Yeah, correct. You can't do Hermit Druid, obviously.
You're looking at like classic Aetherflux Storm to really get through humility.
Basically. Like, we can't beat Storm that way, but we've got other ways to deal with that. Like, our own win condition here is basically Dramatic Scepter into Blind Obedience, which works surprisingly well.
Yeah. I mean, in humility, being Force CMC gets around Abrupt Decay quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Which is super strong. And so then you have, if you're going against your classic Storm decks, you're looking at like Jaleva, and she has an incredibly difficult time getting through enchantments on her own, and she really wants to have fast mana. So, man.
Yep. Let's see, other decks that have come out. Tazri Hulk is actually one I personally like quite a lot. So, Biopower, which we saw in the monthly October stream in Game 1, Tazri Hulk is the deck he actually played there. And I like it a lot because it's Breakfast Hulk plus Food Chain Tazri, which sounds kind of funky, but actually works. Because you do your Flash Hulk stuff, and the way you set up your win there is you mill your deck, and then you Dread Return, targeting Goblin Dark Dwellers.
Yes.
And you use the Goblin Dark Dwellers ETB to flashback Yogg-Will for free, so you can go cast Food Chain from your graveyard.
It's so good. It's so spicy. I love it. And
yeah.
It's really nice seeing the innovation on that. I mean, because Tazri is on its own an incredibly fast deck. And it is very... It's nice that it's not quite full glass cannon. It has protection, but it's so fast. And throwing in Protean Hulk in there makes it a secondary fast win condition, which is awesome. I like it.
Yeah, it's great. Another fast deck that I've seen people talk about quite a lot lately is River May Cry's Mad Farm List, which is also kind of interesting because it's in Mardu colors. It plays Timna and I think Bruce Tal, but that doesn't matter too much. And the list is basically all in on Ad Nauseam.
I have not seen this deck.
It's very interesting. I'd like to play against or with it at some point, because it seems like a very unique experience. And I've been hearing reports from the Finnish cEDH folks that he often tends to get ad nauseas from like 50 or more life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that is spicy.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost, like, depending on your CMC, you're almost guaranteed to draw 30, 40 cards with that. That is huge.
Easily.
Yeah. And then I think I have been seeing more Zur stick around, but it's a little bit slower nowadays. It's more of a control-y Zur than just all in Doomsday Zur.
Yeah, people have kind of been looking into that lately. Control Zur, or like Control or Stack Zur, has obviously been around for quite a while and people have experimented with it. But it's been making a bit of a comeback. It kind of fell out of favor sometime around last year, and people stopped really paying attention to it. But for some reason, I also can't really explain why, they're starting to come back to it.
I think it's adjusting to Protein Hulk. And a lot of the newer innovations that we have been seeing have been around the changes in more graveyard hate or needing more graveyard hate and how you can adjust your decks accordingly. And having a commander that, although slower, lets you play a leyline and lets you tutor out a Rest in Peace into play if you get that far is really strong when decks are designed to deal with their graveyards a lot. And there have been a lot of changes that have been working along those lines. And I'm really excited to see the meta shift with that.
That's a good point. I used to be big on stacks like ages ago. Kind of when I started getting into the whole competitive side of EDH. And the one thing I never particularly liked about it was that due to the toolboxy nature, I'd often end up with really awkward hands. But now that there is like a fair amount of diversity for combos, and Zur has the ability to fetch different types of enchantments to deal with these different types of combos, it does kind of make sense for him to look more into this sort of reactive style of play.
Yeah, it's nice to see the meta adjust and evolve and not feel stagnant. It's also a challenge to keep up with it, which is the other hard part with that.
Especially for us as content creators, because people are always like, oh, why are you not playing this new deck? Or why are you not playing this new deck? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge too, especially when you've got like content that's been recorded a month prior and hasn't been able to actually be pushed through the whole production process yet. And they're like, but your deck doesn't show this card in it. Well, it had it when I played the game.
Yeah.
That was a month and a half ago, and since then things have changed. But it's nice to be able to actually look at things as a snapshot in time and see where you've adjusted from there. Now, one of the downsides with that is we're also seeing some big spikes in cards.
Yeah.
As we adjust with new cards and as we want to make new decks,
we need more cards.
And so yeah.
Teferi used to be a deck that I could recommend for people that want to play like cEDH proper on a budget. But after some of the more recent spikes, that's not really the case anymore. Transmute Artifact and Power Artifact have been going up so much, and those two are very crucial for the deck.
Yeah, I remember when Transmute Artifact was like $40. And that wasn't that long ago. That was less than like a year and a half ago. And now it's...
Oh, yeah. I got mine in like December, I think, for fairly cheap. And it just started going up and up. Like, I think near mint copies of that card are at around 120 euros on Magic Card Market.
Yeah. I mean, it spiked in August. There was a buyout, and it went up to over 200 in places. And it's dropped back down again. It's dropped down to like 130. But that's still, it's... Oh man, 3 times the price for the same card. It really hurts.
Mm-hmm. And like, it's not even because people are really playing with the card. It's just because people know that it's not going to get printed anymore.
Yeah, it's a reserve list card. They're getting bought out. Power Artifact saw it too. It's kind of funny that one of the few major staples for competitive EDH is like Mystic Remora, and it's hanging around like $1 or $2 because it was a common and it saw a ton of print. But the rares and the uncommon 2s from way back when, those just, it's getting really hard to say get into this format without having to, drop a car on a deck.
Yep.
And
that's sad, honestly.
It is.
Like, there are a lot of things that we have to deal with when it comes to pushing competitive EDH further into the Magic mainstream. Like, people's mindsets, and on top of all of that, we are now adding an incredibly high barrier to entry simply because some of the cards we play with just keep shooting up in price.
Yeah. And it's one of the big questions we get every single time is, what's a budget alternative for Time Twister?
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you have entire strategies based around the card and not having it really, you have to move on to you have to take plan B and replace it with something that isn't nearly as strong. And it's one of those things that it's really sad that because of the reserved list, we have a select few people who have those cards or were lucky enough to get those cards when they were there to play with them in any sort of sanctioned tournament. The nice part is that you don't have to play competitive EDH in a sanctioned tournament. And if you're playing with friends, you can play with proxies and you can enjoy the fun of the cards and the design that was from the original bits of Magic without having to spend $1,000 on a Time Twister.
Yeah. Using proxies for competitive EDH is not something that is in any way bad or immoral or anything like that. It's not reasonable to make someone spend, as you said, money that could be used for a car.
Yeah.
Or like several months of rent on things for a hobby that you want to enjoy. And that's why we have things like Cockatrice, things like Play EDH, or things like printers and sites where you can make proxies. Use those resources if you want to play competitive EDH. Don't bother with stuff like card authenticity or something. There's no moral high ground there. Just, if you want to play competitive EDH, just do it.
That's
you don't need
really
to spend
big.
all that money.
I mean, there is an interesting and amazing dynamic that happens in competitive EDH, where you will have a game be free for all, 1v1, v1, v1, and something will happen and the game will suddenly turn to 3v1. And then something else will happen and it will be 2v1, v1. And then it'll be 2v2. And then a turn later, it's back to 1v1, v1.
And this happens all the time.
And you just keep going. And it's an amazing political dynamic that you can't, that you can get glimpses of in Casual Commander, but you don't get to really dive into it unless you're really pushing it. And it's a spot where we've got a little bit of a lack in support for the community from Wizards, in that they're never going to be reprinting these cards. And we want people to enjoy this environment. So please try it.
Yeah.
With the surge in reserve list buyouts, we've also had other things that are really nice. We hit a mainstream article.
Oh, yeah, on Channel Fireball.
Yeah.
That was great.
Rachel Agnes wrote an article about it. You may know her from the Vintage Super League. She's been doing articles on CFB for a while. And she posted about competitive EDH and how she likes playing EDH. And it's so awesome to get a professional player to back this format and say there is value and fun in this, and they see it the way we see it, which is really great.
Yeah, it made me really happy because, I mean, obviously that's reading a bit much into it, but in a way it kind of was validation of sorts that we're not crazy by liking this completely different way of playing Magic. It's actually really good, and it's unique, and it's interesting.
Yes. No, it definitely was validation behind it, because getting a large community view on it and being able to talk about the theory behind it and what you're trying to do was really nice to see that, and the effort put into it was really appreciated.
Mm-hmm. And it also kind of supports this feeling I've been getting that people are really starting to open up to the idea of EDH not just being this casual format where you're not supposed to do bad things because people will hate you for it. And that's good. People should play EDH the way they want to. If they want to play it casually, that's fine by me. That's a cool thing to do. But if they want to play it competitively, that should also be a fine thing.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that's basically all that's happened in competitive EDH in the last 5-ish months. To round out today's podcast, we are now going to do a couple of viewer questions as promised. And we've got some interesting ones. I'd say let's get right into it. Cameron, where in the hell is the Bloodpot deck tech?
It is going to be coming eventually. I don't believe we've recorded one yet. I believe we have a Gitrog deck tech coming up with Leptis, who won the tournament he won the tournament that Lime Blue went undefeated in the Swiss in.
Yeah.
And he is the froggy monster. He wrote a primer on it, and that deck is a beast unto its own. And Bloodpod does deserve a deck tech. It is going to happen soon, TM.
Yeah. The reason why we haven't done a Bloodpot deck tech yet is probably because I was the one playing it on the show. I picked it up to play it on the show and immediately stopped playing it afterwards because I'm really not much of a stacks guy.
Yeah, I know Luke picked it up a lot too.
Yeah, now that we've got Luke on the show, we can probably do that at some point since it is his deck in a way. Like him and Lurker have been working on it for the most part.
All right.
So yeah, that's definitely going to be coming. Question number 2.
Sigi, is Teferi's protection viable in cEDH?
Nice try. No, it's absolutely not viable. Don't even try to persuade me about the Lethal Vapors Teferi's protection combo, because that thing is complete and utter nonsense. Furthermore, Teferi's protection doesn't really help you. Like, look at what people win with in cEDH. Laboratory Maniac, Aetherflux Reservoir. What's other win outlets? Like Twister Loop nonsense, which I guess it can protect you from until it's their turn again. But,
yeah. So It's a redundant copy of Angel's Grace with some additional things on top of it. It lets you not lose life if you use it with ad nauseum, but it puts your mana total higher in order to actually go off. It has unique and interesting things, but it doesn't really work. It costs too much for the current meta.
Yeah. And it just doesn't do enough.
For the 3 CMC. Yeah.
Okay. Here's a quick and easy one. Cameron, when are we going to have more audio content coming out?
Now? Well, we got the podcast. We're going to be doing it more often. We actually got a community member to contact us and ask us if we were wanting his assistance in doing audio editing. And this is helping us out with doing this audio work. The audio podcast is a lot of effort on Sigi's part as far as the editing and mastering of the audio, and having the ability to have him not have to do that while he's going through his college courses has been able to open up more content. On top of that, we are going to be pushing out more of our videos with an audio download link. So our strategy spotlights and possibly some of our set reviews as well. The downside of the set reviews is we're displaying new cards, and not having the visual for those is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But we are going to be putting out our videos some of our videos in audio as well, which hopefully people will enjoy.
Yeah, I also hope so.
So, Sigi, do you ever play casual EDH? And if so, what are your favorite decks?
I honestly don't really play casual EDH, no. I did make a casual deck recently to play with friends of mine when I'm playing in person, but that's more of a concession than something I'm really particularly passionate about. The deck is kind of fun though. I'm basically playing Circu Lantern Control.
Oh man, that's harsh.
It's so funny. I do enjoy it, definitely, but if possible, I'd prefer to play competitive EDH 10 out of 10 times.
I can understand that.
What's it like for you?
I have decks to suit the people that I sit down to play with. So I do have, I'd say probably my 2 favorite casual decks is a Progenitus Planeswalker deck that is kind of 5-color good stuff, lands, and has maybe 15 cards dedicated to Planeswalkers. It's a fun deck. It's slow. It's not fast at all. And then I have an 8.5 Tails.
That one.
Mono white control that had people like Simon saying, "What the hell is going on with this?" Because it is surprisingly powerful for mono white. And that power comes from about 18 board wipes that are in the deck. And so it's really banking on trading a board wipe for 2 or 3 cards from each opponent, and then kind of just protecting itself where it can. And that one is my pet deck. I have had that since almost the start, and I foiled out the entire deck that can be foiled. And it's that one definitely sticks around with me.
It's a cool deck, definitely. Easily one of the more interesting casual decks I've seen.
It taught me so much as far as learning threat assessment and learning when to act. I've probably played over 500 games with that deck. And these are hour and a half, maybe 2-hour long games. And knowing when to wrath the board or clear the board, it's not always the same thing. When do you trade a 7-mana wrath for 1 creature? Sometimes it's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's definitely not. And it taught me a lot in threat assessment. And it made it so that I could pilot Tasigur quite a bit better than I would without it.
That does make a lot of sense. Now, for our other members, Simon I'm actually not sure about. But I know that Luke and Dan do enjoy the occasional round of casual.
Yes, Dan. Dan has an Aloro Pillow Fort Planeswalker deck. And I do love the fact that every time I have played casual with Dan, I have used Nico Bolas to destroy his Ugin.
Nice.
Yes, it has been flavor win every time. I know Luke had his Eily Tinfin deck. So there's a few out there.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. So, if you could ban or unban one card, what would it be?
That is actually kind of hard because there's varying reasons for banning cards.
Mm-hmm.
And while it does kind of suck that I would say this, we have Library of Alexandria that's banned. I feel like to ban a card to make the environment more available is I would ban Time Twister.
That's fair. I could get behind that.
If I was banning a card to make the format more balanced, it would be Adnaz.
You think?
Well, so it's Adnaz or Protein Hulk. To me.
I mean, it's your take. There's probably not much of a reason to start a debate about that because that could easily fill an entire podcast by itself.
So Adnaz, if you build around it, is 5 mana, draw 30, 40 cards. And that power, when you're drawing that many cards, is essentially 5 mana win the game at instant speed. The same thing can be said about Protein Hulk. It's 2-card combo, flash, you win the game. I think that Adnaz has been around long enough that it could see a balance adjustment, but with the way EDH is done, nobody in casual is playing Adnaz, so it'll never get banned.
I too like casting Adnaz to draw 5 worms.
Yes, or 3 dragons.
Yeah.
What about you? If you could ban a card, or unban a card, what would it be?
So I'm gonna preface this with, or is it preface?
Preface.
Okay. I'm gonna preface this with my opinion on bans in EDH as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Due to there being 3 people to play against rather than 1, a lot of the things that would commonly be perceived as totally broken are actually kind of balanced in EDH. Let's take Protean Hulk as an example, since we were talking about that. When 3 people can stop it rather than 1, just in theory, it becomes a lot less scary. And that's true for most of the cards. So, things I would be looking at to remove from the ban list would be things that wouldn't warp the game around them. Which is a way of phrasing it that the EDH Rules Committee has actually used, but them and me probably have a bit of a different outlook on it. I think Tinker would actually be fine to take off, because the only deck that can use it really well right now is Teferi. Outside of that, there are, of course, the Dramatic Scepter decks, but for those, Tinker would just be a mediocre tutor that's kind of narrow, and that's it.
I think you would run into a lot of Paradox Engine decks that would spawn out of that.
I'm not sure about that, actually.
Being able to turn a Mana Rock into a Paradox Engine would... I think that would be a really huge spike in those decks. But no, it's a totally valid way of looking at 3v1 as compared to 1v1. I do see your point there, and I do agree that some of the cards that are banned don't necessarily need to be in that regard.
Okay. Next question. Have we ever thought about doing a how to set up for online play or play EDH video?
No. Now we are.
Yeah.
So, Sigi, how would you be approaching competing in a meta with house rules, or like you go to a store and they have tournament rules. I think like the common ones are no infinite combos or no winning before turn 6, things like that you have to fight against.
So the first big point I'd want to make here that is often overlooked by people giving this type of advice on, say, the subreddit, is that you shouldn't look to abuse these rules as much, because if there's already rules like that in place, you are basically assured that the people in charge of that environment are going to make sure to adjust the rules if you're trying to find some kind of loophole with it. Like, if there's no infinites, people have been recommending Doomsday, but that's kind of not the purpose of the rule. Mm-hmm. So even if it sounds a bit weird, I'd first try to be aware of the kind of environment these people are trying to create. Once you've got that figured out properly, you should look to build a deck that's most in line with that way of thinking, and also the strongest possible deck you can build under these restrictions.
That's a good approach. I know
Do you have any...
So I would look at it that if I was wanting to play in those formats, you wouldn't want to subvert the rules. Because like you said, they're going to adjust the rules to foster the format they are creating, or the environment that they're creating. I would approach it by bringing a set of 4 decks that could play well together, and sit down with a play group and hand out the decks, and have 4 people play competitive decks that are all at the same power level, and see how they like that environment compared to the house ruled environment, and show the difference where you can have people all with decks created around the same strategy and the same mindset going at each other, compared to when you have one deck that's set to combo off on turn 6 and one deck that's set to fill the board full of tokens, and just different strategies that are meant to be more casual or having fun than aimed at winning. And if you're playing an event or a setting where people are, what I have found, if you're playing in an area where people have had house rules that limit how you win, it's due to situations where you have people with vastly different power levels, and you aren't able to really adjust to that. So the store is having to adjust to that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it also leads kind of into our next question.
Mm-hmm.
How can people start building local cEDH communities?
Well, if you have people to play Commander with, step 1 is have a discussion. Because it's a different style of game, and if you just show up with a deck and they aren't ready for it, it's not going to be a fun time for anybody, really.
Mm-hmm.
Have a discussion. Have a budget shot. So say you're going to build a $250 competitive deck. Get involved in the community. Have deck ideas ready. So if people are interested in playing something, have the discussion about what's available. Well, you've never played stacks before. Well, maybe you might enjoy playing it from the piloting side, not playing against it. But in competitive, it's available to play. I also, if I've had that conversation and people can't, like I said, proxy up 4 decks, proxy up 8 decks, have an environment of decks to play, and figure out what you like, and then start working towards building that deck, and take a few weeks to figure out what you like and go from there. Would you add anything to that?
I think the most important point that you mentioned is don't just go in there with a competitive deck and pub stomp. That's the exact opposite of building a healthy local cEDH meta. If you do that, you can be sure that people are not going to be interested. Mm-hmm. Try to avoid that at all costs. Yeah, and try to get people interested in the format. Like, talk about the mindset that goes into it. Talk about what makes it unique, like we said earlier. The like ever-changing dynamic and trying to make optimal plays when you're up against so many people and so many different strategies. All of that.
Sounds good. So, Sigi, got any new members cropping up that I haven't seen yet?
New members for the Lab Maniacs. That's, weirdly enough, something we've been asked about quite a lot. One way to get in touch with us and join our community is through the Play EDH server.
Mm-hmm.
If you go there and you play competitively, we're probably gonna end up talking to you at some point or playing a game or two with you. At the moment, I think we've filled our roster of members quite well, but if we need someone to help out, or we're looking to, I don't know, change up things or something, there is a possibility of us being interested in having new members join us in the future.
Yes.
But it's not something we can say as a guarantee.
The Lab Maniacs formed from people that met within the Play EDH community. Originally, it was a Skype group, and then it moved over to a Discord. And it's that same community that's still growing, that if you do get involved and you do want to join us, that would be your first step, is get involved in the Play EDH community. And if you're around and we get some games in, great. And I can tell you every new member that we have pulled in has been from Play EDH.
Yeah. So we've kind of all just met there. Have any of us actually ever met in person? Because I don't think so.
No, I was almost able to meet Dan when I went to Orlando, but he moved 2 months before.
Ah, rip.
I think Simon had a chance to possibly come near you, but I don't think he did on his summer vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So none of us have actually met face to face.
Yeah. That's definitely a thing waiting to happen.
Yeah. And it'll be a fun time.
For sure. Would we, as the Lab Maniacs, ever support some kind of splinter format, say no reserved list EDH or modern cEDH, stuff like that?
One of the difficulties with competitive EDH is that we really want to be playing EDH. We're taking a format and we're pushing it as far as it can go. And we've seen what happens to formats when they splinter. We've seen Duel, we've seen French, we've seen Canadian Highlander, and the community is very small. The nice part about competitive EDH is that it just is a progression from your existing EDH experience. And I know personally it would take quite a lot for me ever to support a splintered format, and it would be massive changes to ban lists or things like that would push me to the point of supporting a splintered format.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. At the heart of it, we're still just playing EDH. We're just doing it with a bit of a different intention. But at the end of the day, if you go to a shop, you're still going to find people playing the format you play. And that's cool.
I would really not like to be the only guy at the local shop playing this format and then only be able to play it online. That would be a very big disappointment to me.
And it still being the format makes it very important, because transitioning from casual to competitive EDH is much easier that way.
Mm-hmm. You're using the same cards still. You're not having to throw out expensive cards you've purchased.
Yeah.
So with a splinter format in mind, we're probably not going to do that. But looking at cEDH right now, Sigi, is it solved?
No. Oh my god, no. That is absolutely not true. You see people brewing up new, potentially viable decks almost every day. We talked about He-Man earlier. He-Man doesn't play any new cards. It could have existed like that almost a year ago, right after the printing of Thrasios and Timna. Mm-hmm. And things keep changing. It's sort of similar to other Eternal formats where, yeah, sure, you still have access to the same card pool, and there's only a few cards per set or like per block that get into that viable card pool. But the meta keeps like moving and changing, and people start playing different decks, and you have to adjust to that. And sure, it's not like a forced adjustment similar to, say, Standard, but it's natural and it keeps moving. And as long as people are playing the format, it's gonna keep changing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. A lot of the one of the big keys with Stacks decks is you're very meta dependent, and every time the meta changes, Stacks decks have to change, and some things that were viable aren't anymore. And like you said, He-Man could have existed a year ago, but it probably wouldn't have been viable a year ago either.
Yeah.
And the fact that as decks progress, we get new strategies or new takes on old strategies is very, very fun to see.
I very much agree. And I'm happy that people are this willing to experiment, because creativity, even or maybe especially in a competitive format, is very important, in my opinion. Okay, so what is our goal with cEDH?
Oh, that's a really hard one. But I think our primary goal as Lab Maniacs is community development. We are wanting to expand the visibility and availability of this format to people, to possibly broaden the appeal and bring more people into it, to see more meta shifts and be able to brew more decks and be able to play new and different things and still try to push our decks to win.
That's exactly the thing. Like, I mean, I very vividly recall our original intention behind the channel being to open up competitive EDH to more people, to get people interested and talking about it, to get people to play it, not just online, but also in real life. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Like, in an ideal world, I'd drive out to a local game store and they'd have people playing competitive EDH there that I can just sit down and play with.
Yep. And guess what? I've got that now. I just never get to go. Yeah. Seattle's really nice. We've got Mox Boarding House and Cafe Mox, and there's a lot of other ones, but those are the really big congregating points for competitive EDH. And we've got a good group going, and I'm really excited about that when I do get to go out there.
That's really nice. We've got 3 people in like my broader area that seem to be interested. So we're basically just missing a 4th. So if you're like in the Munich area and you're listening to this and you want to jam some cEDH and we haven't already talked on Play EDH or Reddit, then now's your chance.
Yes, hit up Sigi. He would love to play with you. So Sigi, from our last stream, or probably 2 streams ago by now, Dan made a cocktail. Is he making any more of those?
We'd probably have to ask him, but I do know that I do think that he enjoyed this most recent stream where he played sober quite a bit more than the other ones. So it depends. Maybe if we're doing like a special occasion kind of thing, he'll do it again. But it's not going to be a regular thing.
There are 2 groups out there, and they've been very vocal. One that like Dan a little sloshed, and one that don't like the misplays. At the same time, some of the misplays are hilarious. When falling into a chains, that is very hilarious to watch happen.
Yeah, that was solid.
But at the same time, the point of competitive EDH is to have fun while playing as best as you can, and that's not really great. So
yeah.
There's a lot of meme potential, but there's not the best competitive potential. So we'll see.
Yeah. So, have we ever considered playing a 5-man pod?
Oh God. Competitive EDH is probably most balanced at 4 players because of the situations where you need to be 1v3. And in 3-player, combo decks have a much easier time. In 4-player, it's mostly balanced among strategies. And in 5-player, it's just a grind fest. It's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're going to go off, you have an extra person who has a chance of having a counterspell. And so I kind of made a comment a really long time ago that you don't want to go off first in competitive EDH. And that's a really, really broad, generalized comment, which says you want to pick your time after people have wasted a lot of resources. And usually that first fight is a lot of resources. In 5-player, you want to go off 5th.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, you want everybody else to try to get their win condition in place, fight everybody else off, and still fail, and then you go. And so there's a lot of stalemate and posturing, and the game just goes on way too long.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing we've kind of seen happen over the course of us playing together as a play group is that our games have kind of started going longer and longer, except for when I'm playing Breakfast Hulk. But the more you get used to these people you're playing with, the more you're going to end up like reading into what they do and predicting stuff and like calling cards in their hand and so on.
I had it so much easier when you guys weren't used to Tassiger. Oh, God. So you would just let me loop Life from the Loams for 5 turns.
Oh my god, yeah.
And now it's like the second life is in the graveyard, it's gone.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Oh yeah, it's like one of the best value engines ever. But yeah.
What was I trying to get at with this? Oh yeah, so if you were to add another entire player to that equation and like to trying to keep track of everything that's going on and trying to like consider situations where like of who has how much interaction that they can use right now, it's overbearing. Like playing against 3 people sometimes tends to be almost overwhelming in that regard. There's so much to like consider and so many different possibilities, and I don't think I could do 5 people.
I've tried it. It hasn't been fun. And I know that 4 players is where you want to play competitive EDH. It is where the format is balanced. The games are fast yet fun. They're interactive, and people can still fall behind and have a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you really want in a game of Magic.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, we've got one final question for tonight. It's very important and it's probably going to take a long time to answer. Cameron, has Gitrock been viable lately?
Yeah. I mean, it yes. Yeah. People may not be necessarily playing it as much. It definitely is getting the side hate with graveyards that Protean Hulk has. Having to deal with your deck more getting Fairy Macabre or getting things like Praetor's Grasp away from you is always a challenge. I mean, that's what the deck has to fight. And it is definitely still viable. It is, like I said, it's a beast unto its own. And if you want to learn how to play it, it has the capability of going full 4 horsemen, where if you were playing this in a competitive format, if you're actually playing this in a sanctioned tournament, it is a non-deterministic win. You could say, I can keep doing this for forever, and eventually it will happen, but it is 4 horsemen in the fact that theoretically you could do this for the entire length of the tournament round and not have what you want to have happen, but you could still keep going without any effort.
Or even for the entire length of the universe.
Yes, due to random chance. So it is one of those where if you love playing decks that have unique interactions, Gitrock does it. The nice part about learning Gitrock is that it really is just do this one thing. Do that 50 times. Now, while you're doing that one thing, do this other thing. Do that 50 times. Now, while you're doing both of those, add another layer. Add another layer. And you just keep adding layers to what you're doing every time you do your actions. So it's easier to learn, but piloting it is still a challenge. It is very explosive. It is a unique and fun deck to play that definitely still is viable.
I completely agree. I think Gitrog is great. I'm actually going to start playing it myself, and I hope it's going to be fun.
I know I've got it sleeved up as well, so...
Yeah, that, I think, does it for our... I think this is Ixalan now podcast. Yep. The first in our series of set-related podcasts. We haven't talked about Ixalan at all, but that's fine.
Ixalan didn't do too much. I mean, it's popped up a little bit, but...
We'll talk about that in our next podcast, about which cards of Ixalan became relevant, whether there were any new strategies involving Ixalan cards, and so on. You're going to hear about that sometime down the line, whenever the next set drops.
You will.
Yeah, I have been Sigi.
I'm Cameron.
And we are going to see you probably soon, because there's another video coming out. Goodbye.
Goodbye.